I'm a children's.
Hold on.
Did you want me to introduce myself? Because
No, I will introduce you.
All right. Okay.
That's my
I'll
that's
let you
my
do that. Okay. I'm
that's
sorry.
my job. So I'm here with the wonderful Pat Gracey. And Pat, welcome to the Children's Literature channel of the New Books Network, which I host. And it's wonderful to have you on. I'm always looking for library specialists. And I think that you guys have the key to a lock that all of us authors, as well as illustrators and editors and publishers, needs to open. Not just because you buy books, but because you have a special take, view, experience, expertise, background in children's books. And we're going to talk mainly about picture books today, and mainly about Canadian picture books because you are from Canada. So Pat, this is my introduction, and now you're welcome to say a few words about yourself and what you do.
Okay, yeah, I am a children's services specialist at the Toronto Public Library. A very big part of that job, in addition to just being a frontline librarian, I do deal with the public, but I also buy books for 17 branches. That's my area of the Toronto Public Library. The Toronto Public Library is a large system. We have about 100 branches, and about 99 of those branches serve children. We have one called Toronto Reference Library that's really more just for research, but every other library serves children. So we have 99 branches serving children. I buy books for about 17 of those branches, and there are 6 other people who buy books for various parts of the city, and then there's also a chair of the committee. So there are 8 of us on this committee, and we talk about books every week, and we buy books almost every week. And it's a great job to have.
So I'm going to shout out now to the wonderful people. I think it's the North York Library that I visited in the spring. Laurel Taylor Adams and the staff there, extremely kind and knowledgeable, and they suggested that we asked to interview you, and I'm so glad that you acquiesced. Yes. So talk about your background and why you became interested in children's literature.
I actually remember buying children's books even before I went to library school. I just, a lot of them have a sense of magic and wonder to them that I guess they really speak to me, and they're fairly short, convenient reads. I can easily get distracted. It's not that I don't read big, thick novels, but it is nice to be able to read something. I'm talking about picture books in a sitting, and I do read children's novels too. But so I was doing this even before I became a children's librarian. I became a children's librarian in the late 90s. I went to McGill, and then I went down to New York, where I worked for the Queensborough Public Library for a few years, and I really did gravitate towards children's work there. I didn't know when I was in library school that I would be a children's librarian. I thought maybe an academic job would be kind of nice because those are pretty good jobs. But I got accepted very quickly at a few libraries in New York, and I chose Queens. And well, I shouldn't say a few, there are only 3. I think I got 2 contacted me. And so I started working with children in an outreach system. So I'd get to go into schools and read children's books and try to get them excited about reading. And I would promote things like the summer reading club or programs that we had at nearby branches. So even there, I was working at a number of branches. So I do like being able to reach a wide area of the community, and it is a lot of fun, and I still get to do some outreach too. So that's how I sort of got into children's. And I've gone back and forth, but yeah, for the last more than 10, since 2007, I've been almost exclusively working with children's, except for a few years where I was doing adult outreach.
Okay, let's go back to the magic. I also agree with you that there's magic in picture books. A few words on the magic, Pat. Where is the magic? How do you create the magic? How do you decide which magical book to buy? I asked you also to bring a few of your favorite Canadian picture books. And let's start wherever you like.
Well, I've always gravitated, even as an adult book reader, towards fantasy and science fiction. So anything that stretches the boundaries of what is possible in the here and now has always appealed to me very strongly. I've always really liked a lot of folklore stories. Even just kids being mischievous is also a lot of fun. I find that very amusing. And with picture books, this gets depicted really well. So there's a special relationship between the image and the text. And that's one of the things that was really important to me. I do like the image and the text to really kind of get this synergy between them. Sometimes I look at a book and if I see a dissonance, it is a little off-putting, but I think, good illustrators are also part of things. So one of the things I hope to do today is also call attention to some illustrators as well. So yeah, so that's where the magic is for me. It's this synergy that develops between word and image. And just, it's really quite unfettered. Things can happen that you don't happen in real life, but also don't necessarily happen in adult books, which are sometimes a bit more hard, or even adult fantasy. It's not quite the same. There's not the same sense of wonder, I guess.
I'm going to go back to this wonderment and magic, because I think that what you've described is this unpredictable zone that a publisher will decide to publish a manuscript. The editor will fit the text with an illustrator. I want to say artist, and then who knows what's going to happen. Then you go into some magical a place where you can't predict whether this synergy is going to happen or not.
Well, if it doesn't happen, I probably don't get to see the book in the first place because the publishers wouldn't recommend it. I don't want to give the impression that I'm a particularly harsh judge. I am for a few things, like if you want to write a book that has poetry in it, I really like poetry to feel like poetry. Poetry itself, lyrics, they also have their own magic. There's a sense of flow. I've noticed a lot of times lately that, my colleagues have also noticed that I grumble a lot about anapestic verse, which is "'Twas the night before Christmas and all through the house." It's a classic and it works for that. I've seen somebody publish a book about grieving that had that meter, and it seemed off to me. And just, I find sometimes these things get overused, or people just get really wedded to this structure. They really got to get every beat in the right place, and they really have to make sure the word rhymes exactly. And it doesn't always work. So poetry is really just music, so without necessarily a melody. So I could show you an example right now.
Of course, show me examples.
Okay, you probably know this. You grew up in Canada too, right? Ottawa?
Ottawa until I was 17, that's right.
Okay, so you probably know the National Film Board log driver's waltz. Somebody made a picture book of this. I can't see if I'm holding this up well.
You are.
To hit this okay so I can see myself better. So this is a song by Wade Hemsworth. This book is actually pretty recent. It was only published about 2018, so 6 years ago. And it's a little different. So for those of you who aren't Canadian and haven't seen this many times, this is something that came out in 1979, not the book, the song with the cartoon that I am referring to. I think the song itself is probably another decade or two older. And it was inspired by Wade Hemsworth being by the Ottawa River, and they cut down logs and they float them down the river. And some people, just to help keep the logs from getting jammed, will run out onto the logs on the river and they'll poke at them with sticks and free them up. So I kind of chose this because it's a kind of a classic, maybe traditional, some would even say stereotypical Canadian book. The song is sung, and it does kind of represent an older kind of vision of Canada. I am not going to focus solely on that today. So there's a picture of a log driver on the river there, and then there is the title page. And I am no match for the McGarrigle sisters, but I will give it a try. It's, I think, 6/8 time. It's also hard to find good spots to breathe, but if you ask any girl from the parish around what pleases her most from her head to her toes, she'll say, I'm not sure that it's business of yours, but I do like to waltz with a log driver, for he goes burling down and down white water. That's where the log driver learns to step lightly. He's burling down and down white water. The log driver's waltz pleases girls completely. She's walking down a moose, which is also, when the drive's nearly over, I like to go down to watch all the lads as they work on the river. I know that come evening they'll be in the town, and we all like to waltz with the log driver, for he goes burling down and down white water. That's where the log driver learns to step lightly. He's burling down and down white water. The log driver's waltz pleases girls completely. To please both my parents, I've had to give way and dance with the doctors and merchants and lawyers. Their manners are fine, but their feet are of clay, for there's none with the style of my log driver. For he goes burling down and down white water. That's where the log driver learns to step lightly. He's burling down and down white water. A log driver's waltz pleases girls completely. Now I've had my chances with all sorts of men, but none is so fine as my lad on the river. So when the drive's over, if you ask me again, I think I will marry my log driver. For he goes burling down and down white water. That's where the log driver learns to step lightly. He's burling down and down white water. A log driver's waltz pleases all completely. Okay, so if you ever watch the video, the first thing you'll notice is that the singing is far better. I just want to go back because I did rush through it. But yes, she's by the river there. There are a few things I like about this book that, apart from it, being traditional, classic, and stereotypical, which maybe aren't necessarily great things for some people, but it kind of does reflect significant aspects of, early Canadian life. There's, some, if you see the cartoon, it's more slapstick, but it is kind of funny still. He's showing off his dance moves, the fact that she's climbing down a moose, it is kind of a nod to a lot of Canadian imagery. There's this course that he goes down where you can see him, and she's getting ready for a show. There's a real 20s, like her haircut and her clothes when she's dressed up. I don't know if you can see that her shirt is a concert shirt from a McGarrigle performance. The McGarrigle sisters are the people who did the show. He's putting on a bow tie. And she's climbing out of the house. She's got a backpack. She's actually kind of going after him. In a way, when you watch the cartoon, she's just starry-eyed and swept off her feet. Here, she's more of an agent herself. She's pursuing what she wants. She is not really taken with all these posh people. She likes her kind of working guy. And yeah, so it is kind of done in this nice 20s retro style. There's some moose, beaver. So it's got a lot of Canadian imagery that you'll recognize. It is kind of mostly a European crowd here, but there are some people with different skin tones and stuff, because it is a fairly more modern book. Yeah, but who's sweeping who off of whose feet here? So, and she's also in the driver's seat on the train. I don't know if you can see that. And he's dancing up along until finally they are together in the cabin. So it's kind of romantic too. So one of that. So that's kind of a traditional look at Canada. And I think I was talking about poetry there. So other things I like about that are the fact that there's not actually...
Pat, please mention the illustrator.
The illustrator, thank you, is Jennifer Phelan. So she's written a few children's books, and she also works as a commercial illustrator. And she is, I believe, based in Montreal. Okay, yes. And the other thing I wanted to say is that the lyrics, there's some rhyme, but there's not. I mean, the meter is pretty flowing, but Wade Hemsworth was not concerned with making every last word rhyme, and it makes for a much more naturalistic song. And it works a lot better. And people don't notice once you're into the swing of things, so to speak.
So you're on a roll.
Okay.
Pun intended. Show us some more of your favorites. Okay,
I'm gonna just stick with poetry a little bit more. This is a book by Jon Arno Lawson. I'm done singing. This is called Think Again. We sometimes put our barcodes over our titles, I'm sad to say. The illustrator is Julie Morstad, and I'm a big, huge fan of hers. There's another book by her here that I'm hoping to get around to. I could read 25 books if you wanted, but I probably, well, I just wanted to have a choice depending on what you were going to ask me. So this is an interesting poem. It's called Up for Grabs. I'm just going to show it to you for a sec, and then I'll read it. This has got 4 parts, so you're really just looking at the first part here. Up for grabs. 1. I'm up for grabs. Grab me if you dare. You'll have to try to catch me unaware, or else you'll end up grabbing at the air. Or 2. I'll just show you the imagery first. I'm up for grabs. Grab me if you can. The last who tried to ran and ran and ran and ended up right where he began, right back where he began. And number 3, I'm up for grabs. Grab if you desire to have the truth inside you like a fire, but too hot to be extinguished by a liar. And finally 4, I'm up for grabs, but you would never grab. You hold me knowing that I can't be held, and knowing that to hold is not to have. So that's a really kind of sweet poem. And here there is a lot of rhyme apart from the first, but the meter is much more flexible. There is a meter there, but it's not rigid. So again, I like poetry that is somewhat free. It doesn't necessarily have to be free verse, but I have to feel that the speaker isn't in a straitjacket, so to speak. Okay, so yeah, so that's kind of, I'll just do a few things. Like, I want to return to the idea of traditional Canada for a sec. So that's actually not one of them. I'm going to put that there. So just, I want to mention, that's not the only thing. This is another traditional kind of book called Canada Counts by Charles Pachter. Any book by Charles Pachter will do this. He's got ABC books, counting books. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I will show you that you can open it to any page, and you've got scenes of cottage life. There's a bush plane. There's different kinds of dogs. There are some abstract art and things like that, but a lot of it is fairly Nanaimo bars. So these are a very popular confection dessert that originates in British Columbia. There's a town called Nanaimo. Here's a group of 7, some famous Canadian artists, and some of their work is above each of them. So here, I'll just go very slowly like that. So these are all this is a book that's basically full of Canadian icons. This is a moment from history when we got our own constitution. So unlike the States, we didn't always have well, we did, but a constitution was the British North America Act. Lots of wildlife in these books, and there's a little sign language counting on the back. Another very similar, he does these are very, most every library will have some of these. This is Per-Henrik Gürth, and he's the author illustrator, and Charles Pachter is also the author illustrator. So maple syrup, sugar shack, it's almost too much, right? As far as the ice fishing. So all the things all the things you think of with Canada, hockey, Stanley Cup. There was a bookseller in Montreal, because Canadian books picked up, I guess, picture books picked up in about the 60s. Before that, there wasn't really a lot. Like I could really go back to the 1600s or something, but it's just moral religious chapbooks and woodcuts and stuff, and mostly written by people in Europe who'd never been to Canada. But in the 60s, there was this May Cutler, I think, was a bookseller in Montreal, and she overheard this conversation between, I'm just trying to remember who it was, a bookseller and someone who wanted to write children's books. And the book, well, it was a book representative. And he said, that's easy. You just bring out a hockey book or an Eskimo or Indian legend each year. So I think it was probably not an accurate thing even to say in the 60s, which is why May Cutler may have noted it. But I mean, it is also indicative that that's kind of what a lot of people think of. Log cabin canoe, blueberries, lacrosse. Well, that's a little bit different. Yeah, lakes, bush plane again. So, but they are fun books. The illustration is very cute. He's usually got animals doing all the action. And one more poem.
It's your show.
Yeah, okay. This is down by Jim Long's stage. It's by Al Pittman, who's a Newfoundland poet, and it's illustrated by Pam Hall. I don't know much about them apart from the fact that they're from Newfoundland. They're a little bit like Dennis Lee, very, fun, accessible children's rhymes that are kind of almost like nursery rhymes. So Uncle Tom was an old Tom Cod. He traveled far and wide. He went down on the Labrador to find himself a bride. He swam as far as Hopedale. He swam right down to Nain. And then he turned himself around and swam back home again. So Nain is very, very far up the coast. It's almost in the Arctic. So yes, they're just little short, sweet poems. And yes, this is, I think, an early, by most standards, picture book of poetry. Because I think it's from about the 70s. And that's kind of when a lot of the stuff was getting started. Like, okay, so where do you want to go next? Okay, I can.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, you haven't mentioned my favorite Canadian author, and that's Robert Munsch.
Okay. I don't have a lot of Robert Munsch books today. I actually don't have any Robert Munsch books, but Robert Munsch was one of the people whose books I was reading long before I was a children's librarian. There was a bookstore in Peterborough that sold these little editions. They were literally this big, and you could buy them for 99 cents. And I had a bunch of those. So the early ones, Jonathan woke up and then he heard a sound. Why am I blanking? Paper Bag Princess, obviously. And yes, so I did read a lot of Robert Munsch books. And again, talking about the magic and unpredictable things that happen, total master at that. He can really surprise you. The thing is, I guess, it's not anything, it's just, I feel that he's got so much coverage. He's so famous that I don't really feel I need to call a lot of attention to him. Like, when sometimes I have students from schools doing early education or children's literature, they come to my branch and they want to find books, and their professor has told them, I don't want to see another Robert Munsch book. It's not because he's bad, it's just, he's arrived, basically. So yes, and yeah, he works with a bunch of different illustrators, a lot, more notably with Michael Marchenko. But he has also worked with several others. I'm not sure I can rattle them off the top of my head. But yes, I think Michael Marchenko did all those Matthew in the Midnight, Bus Driver books as well. There's a Fireman. There's a couple of them in a series. So yes, yeah, I like Robert Munsch. I think he lives just up the road in Guelph, which is about a 40-minute drive from me.
Indeed. Okay, so let's continue, and then I want to see if we can make some kind of synthesis.
Okay. So enough with tradition. This is a book called Nana's Cold Days, and I'm hoping I'm saying this right. It's by Adwoa Badoe, who is a little bit like you, a scientist. She's a medical doctor, came to Canada, wasn't able to pursue that because they have to do it here in Canada. I'm not sure that's a great system we have because we need more doctors. But anyway, she turned to writing children's book. I believe she also teaches dance, and the pictures are by Budshra Junaid. Again, not someone I know a lot about, but it's striking imagery. It's a very unique style of art. It looks like it's a bit of collage and maybe paper cut. And it's very textured. I don't know if you can see it very well. So, and it's a fun story. It's about a woman from West Africa who comes to Canada to meet her family that's already living here. So I'm going to move my chair a bit so I can face the camera a little better. Nana's Cold Days by Adwoa Badoe, pictures by Budshra Junaid. I'm just making sure I can see. Okay. Nana stepped off the warm coast of Africa into the cold winter of North America. Oh, she said, "It's too cold for living things." With that, she buried herself under 3 blue top sheets, 3 red blankets, and 3 pink comforters, and she wouldn't come out for anyone or anything. It's kind of a Robert Munch-like thing to say on this. Yeah. Papa tried, Mama tried, and so did Ken and Rama. But Nana turned her face to the wall and fell fast asleep. "Oh dear," said Rama. "Oh dear," said Ken. "Oh dear," said Papa and Mama. "We have to think of something to get our Nana up." Ken peeked through the window to see whether Nana would wake up. "Shh," said Rama. "You might wake her up and make her mad. She won't hear a thing buried under 3 sheets, 3 blankets, and 3 comforters," said Ken. Nana shifted under her sheets and turned to face the door, still fast asleep. "She will never wake up again," said Ken. "Never." And Nana did not wake up, not all that night, and not even the next day. "I know what will wake her up," said Rama. "What?" asked Ken. "High life music from Africa. She loves that," said Rama. Soon some strange music was playing, and a high voice was singing something they could not understand. "Isn't that cool?" asked Rama. "Doesn't it just make you want to dance?" "No," said Ken. "I don't like it at all." The music played for 1 whole hour, although Ken liked it a little bit better and found his feet tapping to the drum beat. Nana was still fast asleep. She even
Pat, we don't want to read the whole book.
Okay.
We want people to go. We want the people to go out and buy it.
Okay.
Or at least go to the library and see what got Nana out from under the 3 blankets, 3 comforters, and 3 whatevers.
So I won't spill the beans on that.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
That's beautiful, and I want to interview that author if we can find it.
Yeah, Adwoa Badoe. And I guess one thing I'll say about this is Nana does come to appreciate some of the aspects of living in Canada, and Ken comes to appreciate some of the food and music of West Africa at the same time. So that's all I'll give away. Yeah, I won't read the whole book then. That's probably a good idea, unless it's a short book.
Okay, you have behind you 2 fascinating books.
Yes, yes. These are the Fan brothers, and I have to say, I think they're both illustrators and authors on this, so it's not one of them is one and one of them is the other. And they've done a number, and again, talking about the magic, these are very surrealistic. This is a story that they've dedicated it to their mom and dad, and they have very detailed art, and it's very surrealistic. And this is actually one of their less surrealistic books. But the idea in this book is that this guy is investigating. There's a ladder left behind. There's some shears on the ground. I don't know if you can see that very well. I only have a small window to look in to see what I'm showing you. And he's coming up and cutting this tree. And the book, this is just the title page. This is one of those books where you have a little bit of a story leading up to the title page. The fellow wakes up in the morning and he finds the tree has been carved into the shape of an owl. So nobody knows who's doing it, but it seems to be happening at night. And yes, there's more, and each one becomes more intricate than the last. So this isn't particularly surreal compared to some of the stuff they do. I'm just gonna, but it is just beautiful, gorgeous art. And they come out with books pretty regularly. So yes, I'm a pretty big fan of the Phan brothers. I think it's Terry and Eric Phan. So there's a little bit of information about them there at the back. And I think they are both Toronto based. Okay. So was there any more of that you were hoping?
If they are listening, I would love to interview them. Just saying.
Okay.
They are hard to get hold of. And what else?
Okay. Well, the other one I had behind me, I'm gonna just stick this back because I don't know if it's still nicely visible or is too much glare. This is the same illustrator I mentioned earlier when I was showing you the poem by Jon Arno Lawson. Julie Morstad, I'm again a huge fan. There's a couple Julie illustrators I'm hoping to share with you, and this is called A Face is a Poem. She's just got a really engaging style. She's got a real way of contrasting colors. She has done a lot of illustration for other authors. She did it for Jon Arno Lawson. She did it for Sarah O'Leary with those When You Were Small books, and there's a follow-up to that. Somehow she makes the eyes, they're just black ink, but they look so deep. And this is a nice cover too, but yes, there's something about the way she does eyes, and she's talking about faces in this book. So this is called A Face is a Poem, and the book again is a poem. So she's just showing where you can see faces in flowers, flowery faces down below, cloudy faces up in the sky, and I'll just bring it in a little bit so you can see some of those faces. Even a potato has eyes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to show you one or two more. And then there's all sorts of little dialogue stuff that's kind of written not in a regular font, but in sort of a handwritten. Have you ever stopped and really looked? And there's all these people remarking on all the different things you can see about faces. And some of them are just saying amazing, exquisite. Other people are saying, I never noticed nostrils before, or where do faces come from? Are ears part of the face? And this little couple in the bottom, one of them is saying, your face makes me happy. And the reply is, me too. So yeah, it's a very, and she does focus on different kinds of eyes, and again, regular common colors, and then she proposes all sorts of kind of colors that don't really happen in real life. Stormy sea, midnight moon. I don't know if you can see that the moon has a pupil in it. So she's just very imaginative, very lovely work with color, and just really very good at depicting children kind of in a state of awe, and just at a lot of things. So yeah, so that's A Face is a Poem by Julie Morstad. So
fantastic. So Pat, let me ask you a few questions now.
Sure.
So you sit with a committee of 8 people, and you have books to choose from. Do you usually have consensus? Does the magic that works for you work for the other people on the committee?
Not the same magic, no. It sometimes happens. Like I told you, I can be very grumpy about poetry that I think is some standard, and other people will think, well, they see other things. I sometimes do too, but I wouldn't say we all.
You're grumpy about poetry that is lumpy.
More or less, yes.
Oh, sorry for that.
That's
okay.
fine.
And what else?
I might work with that in the future. Yeah, I can be a bit of a poetry snob, more so than other people on the committee. But other people, they want to. I mean, we all sort of have things that we want to see. So I wouldn't say that we all agree. Somebody might just think this is terrible, and someone else might see something redeeming in it. Yeah, sometimes we all agree that a book is really great. Less often, I don't think we will, well, it does happen sometimes, but less often will we agree that a book has no redeeming qualities at all. Like usually somebody will see something in it, but I mean, and we usually do, we don't always buy everything, but we try to buy pretty broadly. We also try to be aware that, we are not the start and the end. So you were talking about us having keys to locks and stuff. I suppose you could make an argument that we're great gatekeepers, but we do try to remember that Toronto is a city of 6 to 8 million people. We serve really the greater Toronto area because if you work in Toronto, you can get a Toronto Public Library card. If you own property, if you study. So there are people who have Toronto Public Library cards who live in Brampton, or like me, who live in Hamilton. So there are a lot of different people out there with a lot of different tastes, and we should be able to cater to them all. So I buy books I don't like all the time.
Okay, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the difference between Canadian picture books, US picture books, British picture books, because whenever I visit these countries, I see different books.
Mm-hmm.
Julia Donaldson, who is
She's
probably
British.
a quarter of a library in Britain, is well known in the States, but much less so. Is she more popular in Canada because of the Canada-Britain relationship, or the way that Canadians see the world, maybe in a little bit more British way than the Americans? What is different about Canada versus other books?
Yeah, and that is a tough question because you're starting to see, like, I've got some books here. Like this would be a book that's by an American author with a Canadian illustrator. So David Quinn, I don't know much about him. Ashley Spires is a fairly well-known Canadian illustrator. She does her own books as well. Binky the Space Cat. She does a lot of STEM-related books. The Most Magnificent Thing. So here she's just supporting another author, but she does author her own books. So we do have situations where you have an American author teaming up with a Canadian illustrator or vice versa. I think I've got another one here somewhere. I don't know what I did with it. Jacob's Long Ride. I don't know. I've got it here somewhere, but I don't know what I've done with it. So I'll have to try and look around for that and figure out where that is. But I don't know. Like, I think when I was asked to talk about Canadian books, I was thinking of some of those things that make Canada would be, well, you can have books that are set in Canada. You can have books that, talk about Canadian experience, or books that are by Canadians. And that's what makes Canadian literature for me. For an author like Julia Donaldson, she could be Canadian or American. I think she has really done well in England, and we do have more of her books in Canada than I remember seeing when I was in the States. But I was in the States in the 90s, so I don't know if things have changed. Her books generally are rhyming books. She writes novels too, I think. So yeah, she does have a huge following in Britain, and I think there might be some cross-cultural exchange between Britain and Canada that isn't necessarily shared as much in the States.
Do you ever notice a book from another country that you say this would not fit Canadian culture, or the opposite, perhaps?
Yeah, okay. I can't remember the name of the book, but I was just looking at it about a month ago. We still bought some. We just didn't think we're going to buy a lot of them. It was a book about the equinox being celebrated in San Diego, which is pretty far south, right? So it kind of made me laugh because the amount of time difference between the middle of winter and the middle of summer was so much different than it is here. So yeah, so we do kind of, and like, we do buy books about major American figures like Rosa Parks and stuff like that. We buy books about famous artists in the state, but less often and in less volume, I would say. So we do get, and then every now and then, like, I remember there was this book about a couple of this couple that, and I don't remember the name of the book, but they were some naturalists, or one of them was a naturalist and another was their partner. And I think they both were involved with exploring Alaska and tracking wildlife and stuff like that. But it just seemed that they were a little bit obscure. I mean, Alaska is a lot like Northern Canada, but we have our own people like that. So we would buy some of these books, but we would tend to favor books where we have similar Canadians. So we buy a lot of books about Viola Desmond, but we do buy books about Rosa Parks because everyone knows who Rosa Parks is. So we get both. But yeah, we do try to emphasize, Canadian icons. I mean, because I would say probably 20 years ago, not a lot of Canadians did know who Viola Desmond was. She was the woman who went to a theater in Nova Scotia and was told she had to go sit up in the gallery because she was Black. And now she's on the $10 bill and people do know her, and there are quite a number of books about her, but this is actually a fairly recent phenomenon.
Pat, I'm going to make an observation.
Okay.
We also share a love for, when you say magical books, and we've talked for 40 minutes, our show is nearing the end.
Wow.
And we haven't mentioned nonfiction, STEM, I didn't prompt you. You could have talked about nonfiction. Is there less magic in nonfiction?
Well, nonfiction does include fairy tales and folklore, so no. There is a lot of like this book I read from, the poetry books I read are nonfiction, because poetry is 800s. So that is technically nonfiction. Books about writing are nonfiction. There are books in the very early zero ranges that are about aliens and UFOs and Sasquatch and things like that. I would say yes. When you're in the section about hard sciences, you may find that some of the books are more about real things, but there's a lot of wonder if you look at stuff going on under the ocean. There are some amazing books about ocean life. I didn't prepare to bring nonfiction, but there are a lot of nonfiction books that do surprise you with the behavior of some of these animals, or the things they can do.
I've interviewed at least two authors who've written gorgeous lyrical books, rhyming books about the sea. Jennifer Byrne and Susan Johnson Taylor, and I agree with you. And I'm going to ask you now the question that might kind of sum it up. What kind of books are you looking for? What is missing in your dream palette of picture books that you're not getting enough of?
Well, I guess it's very hard to imagine what's missing, because I mean, there are some things we are kind of getting a lot more authors. I've talked about Canada as a country that so far, I didn't realize that 40 minutes already. I didn't really have a chance to talk.
We've been having lots of fun,
and I wouldn't mind doing that. So this is another book called Let's Go, Ayo Oyeku, and it's by Julie Flett. And I would like to see a lot more books like this. It's just because what this is it's just a bunch of Indigenous kids having fun on skateboards. And what I like about this is that, we live in an age where, some people might say, well, skateboards belong to nobody, right? Skateboards 100 years ago in 1920, skateboards didn't exist. So there's nobody can say, well, that's our culture, right? So this belongs to everybody, and it's just something anybody can do. And this is basically a book about a child, and I won't read the whole thing, but he's looking enviously at these children playing on skateboards. And there's nice sounds in there. So there's a lot of sounds like that. I do really like nonsense words, although this isn't really a nonsense word so much as a sound effect. And they're pretending to skateboard, and they kind of run along the path pretending to skateboard. And then mom comes home one day from grandma's house with the skateboard from when she was a kid, and the kid tries it and falls a bit. Well, actually, no, here they're not falling, they're riding along on their bum at first, and then they try and fall, and they discover a butterfly, so they're still distracted. And then it rains for 2 days, and they can't wait to go out. So and then they goes and sees all the other kids playing in the park, and he just kind of sits aside and watches. I shouldn't say he, because it's not really clear whether it's a he or a she, but yeah, the child is just going to watch, and some more just watches come along, and eventually they skateboard along. It's a very dynamic book, and at the end, and the How Egwa is Cree. It's Cree language. It just kind of means okay then, or right then. And there's not a glossary, but there's a little afterword where she does introduce a bunch more Cree words that would be pertinent to skateboarding culture. So that's kind of why I like it, because it's an Indigenous book, but it's kind of doing something anybody could do. And it's just everybody's sharing the same kind of joy. It doesn't matter who they are. Yeah, so I do like books that kind of bridge cultures, I guess. That's
What are you missing?
What am I missing? I don't know.
Well, what should the world have more of these days for picture books?
Well, I like, one of the things I liked about the pictures in the Log Driver's Waltz was that women had more agency, and we are seeing more of that, actually. Every time I sort of feel that I'm wishing for something, I kind of find that maybe I just haven't been looking for it. You know, when you go to university and you hear about a new philosopher, and then the next thing you know, you're hearing that name again and again, and maybe it was always there and you weren't noticing it. There are a lot of books coming out. I'm always surprised that I look at these books every week, and then I'll come through my bookshelves, and I do go on vacation sometimes, but every now and then where did this book come from? I don't remember buying this. So what is missing for me? I guess I do really like fantasy, I guess. So I would always want to see more of that, but I couldn't say that there's none of it either. So I really like folklore. I wish there were more adaptations of some of those, like, books you can read, like picture book versions of some of those Andrew Lang collections, like the Blue Fairy Book, the Red Fairy Book. And I don't know if that's going to happen, because some of those stories are pretty dark. Sometimes there's some,
that was my next question. As an author, right? You know, I live in Israel. We're going through some dark times now, and I find myself writing darker stories.
There are dark books, not necessarily folklore, but I'm sorry if I can't remember the name, but there's some very good books on refugees. There's a fairly recent one that I think is now in the Forest of Reading in Ontario, called The Cricket War, and I think that is set somewhere in West Africa, I think, and it's about having to relocate. It might be Nigeria, I'm not 100% sure, but it's about this family that has to relocate, and I think it's during the Nigerian Civil War with Biafra. I think I may not be quite right on it. I believe the book's called The Cricket War, and in The Cricket War, for sure, the family is relocating, and they're kind of counting down the days for the war to end. And having to relocate. And, you know, in some books, families never go back. There are books with people on boats and stuff. Thao Lam has a wordless book about emigrating from Vietnam to Canada as a part of the wave of boat people. So I don't think children's books shy away from dark themes. It's probably more true now that they don't than it may have been in the past, but there are certainly more books dealing with things like war. A lot of times, but not always, like the Thao Lam book and the Cricket War, I believe, are both, well, the Thao Lam book is definitely in the regular picture books. We also have advanced picture books for kids who are higher readers. And sometimes if a theme is particularly disturbing, we'll put it there. But usually that's because the reading level is higher as well. I think I'm really bad. I'm looking at the picture of you rather than the camera all the time.
And no, it's fine. And of course, we need lots of happy books as well.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, this was wonderful. Let's do it again a year from now.
Okay. Yeah,
And,
I can focus on other things besides Canadian picture books. I could just talk about general picture books or
well,
something.
yeah. Let's do that in half a year or a year. We'll talk about the magic of a picture book.
Okay, yeah. Give me a theme and I'll work with it.
Well, Pat, we just had it because you started this discussion talking about this wonderful discussion, talking about why you love picture books, and you said it because they were magical. There's a synergy between the text and the artwork, and this is, in my mind, hard to predict, and it's actually hard to achieve at a very high level.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to talk to you about that. So
Okay.
if you had as good a time as I did,
I did, yeah.
then
A little nervous. I'm not used to being on a podcast. I think this is my first podcast ever. So
you were a pro,
okay.
And it was great talking to you. So, ladies and gentlemen from all over the world, this is the wonderful Pat Gracey of the Toronto. It was the Toronto Public School System, and
Toronto
you
Public
are
Library.
Toronto Public Library System, and you are in charge of purchasing picture books for 17 different libraries.
Mm-hmm. And there's
It's
7 other people like me.
yeah, but we had you today, and
Yep.
you came very highly recommended.
Laurel's another one of those people.
Yeah, and Laurel recommended you. So
Okay.
thank you, Laurel. Thank you, Laurel, and take care. And before I forget, my name is Mel Rosenberg, and I am the host of the Children's Literature Channel of the New Books Network. And Pat Gracey, this has been a wonderful interview. Thanks so much, and I look forward to doing this again sometime in the near future.
Thank you, Mel.
And let's hope for good times.
Yeah, very much. Peace soon.
Take care.
You.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.